For decades, we've all been told a pretty simple story, right? Cholesterol is the bad guy, the main villain when it comes to heart disease. But what if the actual data tells a completely different story? What if the conventional wisdom has it all backwards? That quote is from Dr. Zoe Harcombe, a researcher who dug into massive amounts of global health data. She fully expected to confirm what we all know, that high cholesterol is linked to more death. But instead, she found the exact opposite. Yeah, an inverse relationship. When she looked at the data from 192 different countries, this really clear pattern just jumped out. Countries where people had higher average cholesterol levels, well, they consistently had lower rates of death from all causes. That doesn't just challenge the old story. It completely flips it on its head. So if higher cholesterol doesn't automatically equal higher risk, what does that say about this whole idea of good versus bad cholesterol? It kind of seems like we need to take a step back and ask a much more basic question. Let's just get back to square one. What is cholesterol? Chemically speaking, it's C27H46O. It's one single molecule, and it is so absolutely vital for us that, as Dr. Harcombe says, without it, you would literally die instantly. It's the building block of every single cell in your body. And that leads to a pretty obvious logical problem, doesn't it? If cholesterol is just one thing, one single molecule, how on earth can there be a good version and a bad version? How can something that's essential for life also be our biggest enemy? It just doesn't quite add up. Dr. Harcombe has this brilliant way of pointing this out. She suggests you ask a doctor for the chemical formula for good cholesterol, and then ask for the formula for bad cholesterol. You know what the answer is? There isn't one, because they are the exact same molecule. And this is where we get to the heart of the misunderstanding. The terms we use, good HDL and bad LDL, they aren't describing different types of cholesterol. They're describing the lipoproteins that carry the cholesterol. They're the vehicle, not the passenger. Think of it like a taxi service running inside your body. Our blood is mostly water, and things like fat and cholesterol can't just float around in it. So the body smartly packages them up in these things called lipoproteins. LDL, that's the taxi driving out from the liver, making deliveries of vital stuff to all your cells. HDL, that's just the taxi on its way back to the liver. It's not a story of good versus evil. It's just a delivery route. All right, so this brings us to the big one, the diet heart hypothesis. You know the story, we've heard it for 50 years. Eating saturated fat raises your cholesterol, which then clogs your arteries and gives you a heart attack. But does the evidence actually back that up? Well, when you start looking closer, the whole hypothesis starts to look a little shaky. For example, women tend to have higher cholesterol than men, but a lower risk of heart disease. Or how about each? Our risk of heart disease goes up as we get older, but our cholesterol levels often go down. And then you've got the famous French paradox. A diet swimming in saturated fat, but some of the lowest rates of heart disease in Europe. The theory just doesn't seem to fit the facts. So, if cholesterol isn't the arsonist starting the fire, what if it's actually the firefighter? This leads to a whole new theory that completely reframes what cholesterol is doing in our bodies, and it starts to point the finger at the real culprits. Okay, so the theory starts with this idea. The root problem isn't the cholesterol itself. The problem starts with damage to the wall of an artery. You can think of this initial damage as a tiny little fire breaking out. So what's causing that fire? Who are the actual arsonists? Well, a growing body of evidence is pointing to things like too much sugar, smoking, chronic stress, pollution, and some of those highly processed vegetable oils. These are the things that seem to be injuring the delicate lining of our arteries. And what does your body do whenever there's damage? It sends in a repair crew, right? Well, cholesterol is a key player on that repair crew. It's the firefighter. It shows up on the scene to patch the damage and help heal the artery wall. This analogy just nails it. We find cholesterol at the site of plaques and arteries because it's part of the emergency response team. Blaming it for causing the problem is like showing up to a house fire and blaming the firefighters. They're only there because something went wrong in the first place. Now, If you start to see cholesterol in this new light as a repair agent, it naturally makes you start to question the #1 treatment for high cholesterol, statins. Are they really the miracle drug we think they are? Or is it more of a risky trade-off? So let's talk about the actual benefit. For a very specific group of people, patients who have already had a heart attack, taking a statin every day for 5 years might extend their life, on average, by about 3 to 4 days. And you really have to weigh that tiny potential gain against the possible side effect. And what are those side effects? Well, a lot of patients report something called the 4 M's. That's muscle aches, memory loss, mind fog, or sort of cognitive decay, and a loss of mojo. Your energy, your vitality. And listen, this isn't just some vague complaint. Dr. Harcombe tells the incredible story of a man named Dwayne Graveline. This guy was an astronaut. One of the most brilliant people on the planet. He started taking statins, and suddenly he couldn't remember where he'd parked his car. He stopped taking the drug, and his memory came back. They convinced him to try it again, and the memory loss came right back. And the risk of these things isn't trivial. Some data suggests that roughly 1 in every 10 people who take statins will experience some form of muscle damage. That's a pretty significant chance for a drug you might be on for the rest of your life. So, where does this all leave us? If fixating on that one cholesterol number is the wrong approach, then what's the right one? It seems like it requires a whole new framework for how we think about our health. What this all points to is a really fundamental shift in our focus. Instead of obsessing over one single number on a lab report, the new approach is much simpler and much more holistic. Focus on improving your overall health by improving the food you eat. Dr. Harcombe's advice, when you boil it all down, is incredibly straightforward. Eat real food. Eat food in the form that it actually comes from nature. The idea is to avoid all that highly processed stuff that might just be starting that fire in our arteries in the first place. And so this all brings us to one last really powerful question to leave you with. Maybe the question we should be asking isn't, is my cholesterol too high? Maybe the real question, the much better question is, what is my body working so hard to repair?